Morning, everyone. How's everybody doing today?
Awake and ready.
Yay. We want to thank you all for coming this morning. For those of you who don't know us, I see some new faces. Welcome also to you. My name is Nayaswami Gangamata, and this is Nayaswami Daiva, and it's our joy to be here with you today. Our topic this morning reminds me of the story of the man who had a beautiful farm. He had spent many years cultivating it, and he was very proud of it. And then a priest came by and noticed its beauty, and he said, "Oh, I, farmer," he must have been in Ireland, I don't know. He said, he says, "This farm," certainly not Brooklyn, I don't think, but anyway. He said, "This farm is so beautiful. What a beautiful farm that you and God have created together." And the farmer, not wanting to insult the priest, said, "Yes, that may be true, but you should have seen it when God had it all to himself." And this story really explains the dilemma that we have when we talk about our own creativity, our own strength, our own power, and that everything comes from us. And yet we have this reading that is so true, that everything comes from God. That's what we're reminded of this morning. I am the vine. Ye are the branches, that incredible power and blessing that flows from the guru to the disciple. And then the reminder that the guru is always with us. There's the story of the great saint Ramakrishna. He was on his deathbed, and he could hear his disciples weeping in the other room. And he asked the man that was taking care of him, he said, "Why are they crying?" And this man says, "Well, sir, they're sad because you're going to be leaving them." And Ramakrishna says, "Well, where do they think I'm going?" Right? We talked about attunement last week with the guru, and this week's topic touches on about it too. What does that mean, attunement to the guru? Does it mean we wear a little button with his picture on it, or we wave a flag around? And maybe we do, and that's okay. But the attunement, our reading this morning was reminding us, it goes so much deeper than that. Learning to feel his presence in every moment. And we had a beautiful example with Swami Kriyananda when he was alive. He always lived like that. He always drew his creativity, his power, his friendship, love, joy, all from the guru, all from Master. And I've shared this story before, but as we know, Swami Kriyananda wrote over 400 pieces of music. He's written over 100 books. And every time he would give a talk, I would always want to make it personal. And I would go up to him and say, "Thank you," and he would say, "It wasn't me." And he would point up top, meaning it was God. But then, I wouldn't give up. And I'd say, "No, thank you. I want to really thank you." He goes, "Look, it wasn't me. It was Divine Mother. I'm just the channel for all that creativity to come through." And again, I guess 3 times to charge. And and finally Swami says, "Listen, it's not me, it's the guru. We can open ourselves to his power, to his grace, to his creativity." And that's where the path of yoga comes in. Yoga helps us to make that connection, to teach us how to draw on the guru, to feel for his presence in every moment. It's interesting that yoga means union. For many years, I thought it just meant pretzel, But in our reading again this morning in our affirmation book, yoga's come a long way. And I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. 10,000 people doing yoga in New York City, on International Yoga Day. But when I was growing up, there was no talk of yoga and any of these things. And we're living in such an amazing time, aren't we? But yoga gives us those tools. And what's one major tool that we talk about all the time, and we're reminded of it again this morning, and that's meditation. Meditation is so important. But it's hard, isn't it? And it's easy to think, well, I had a meditation this morning, however long it was, and I still am cranky when I get up. I still, what's the point? Why do I even need to do my meditation? I don't see any progress. But a wise man once said that a bucket of water fills how? Drop by drop. That's what we're doing when we're meditating. Drop by drop, we're filling our soul. We're making that connection. Making that connection is so important. It's interesting, our topic is self-reliance versus, and Lorna accentuated this self-reliance, the little s versus the big S, right? The little s has to make that effort, okay? We all know the story of the guy named Joe who was out of luck. He was really coming on very, very hard times. and he started to pray to God. He said, God, you really have to help me. I'm going to play the lotto, but you have to help me. And so lotto night comes and he doesn't win. And the next week, Joe finds himself in even more dire straits. He's lost his job, he's going to lose his car, he doesn't know what's going to happen. And then somebody else wins the lotto, and then again, he's just praying, God, I need your help. And then what needs to happen, as it is for me, the heavens opened up for Joe, and this big light and booming voice from God says, Joe, you have to meet me halfway here. Buy a ticket. The spiritual path is 25% of our effort, but Yogananda always reminded us we have to do 100% of that. It's like the little girl that was in Sunday school, and her teacher asked, what makes a seed sprout to a flower? And the little girl was so smart, she was in Sunday school. She says, it's God that helps do that. But she said, fertilizer helps. We have to add our energy. We have to add our 100% of that equation. And then always remembering that other 75%. 50% is the grace of God. 25% is the grace of the Guru. Abide in me, abide in the vine. And the branches, what branches are strong? The ones when we abide in him, when we do our practices, when we come to Sunday service, when we're part of a community, when we're reminded of what we're doing here. So Daiva will talk. It looks like he checked some books out of the library. He has a nice bag. But we're so blessed. Self-reliance versus self-reliance. Remembering to make our effort, remembering that we really are that bigger S of self-realization. The knowing, right now, Yogananda said, the knowing that we are part of God, embodied, mind and soul, and these practices help us to remember that. So I want to thank you all for coming out this morning, and I think I'll turn it over. God bless you all.
I figure service should be over by about 3 o'clock, so. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be sharing this time together. I'd like to start with a thought, and it's an unusual thought, even for people who are aspiring to fullness in relationship to Spirit, and that includes, of course, everyone here. Yogananda said that it takes very, very, very good karma to even remotely know or think that somehow what you're looking for might be found in connection with Spirit, in God. And then we have all of the work to figure out what that really means and what that looks like. I may return to this, or I may just leave it lie there for people to poke at and sort for. But it's a thought. We're trained. Our daughter is here. She's visiting. She was raised. We moved to Erica. Hi. Thank you. Forgive me again. We moved to Ananda village when she was 2 years old. Because I looked in the mirror and I realized that I had done enough things by that time that I could do virtually anything I put my mind to. And I could do it successfully. And then I looked around and there was nothing that I could find anywhere that looked like it was worth doing. It wasn't that there weren't big things to do, but I could tell that all of them led to the same experience. They would all just lead back to the same place where I already was. And I grew up in a very agnostic household, if not atheistic. So I didn't have a lot of exposure to Christian teachings or anything, but I had heard that Jesus once said, "Seek God and everything else would come." And I think this was probably the defining moment of this lifetime, because I think everything else, my reflection is that everything else has come as a result of this one decision, which was I was smart enough to realize that on my own I wasn't going to be able to figure it out. And I would have a very nice life and have nothing at the end of it. And that maybe I would choose God and see where that led. I'd been in business, I'd been in college, I saw all streams led to the same point, except this, and I hadn't tried this out. And it really has been the defining gesture. I would like to just suggest that it's worth thinking about that choosing God, that seeking God might be a career choice.
Mm-hmm.
In seeking God, we don't get to put down the world. Not in this time, not in this age, not with the world in the chaos and mix and mess that it's in. But I had been politically active. I had been dynamically and socially active. I had been, for peace and I was against Roundup 30 some years ago. It's the new fad. But, GMOs, there's a great little cartoon I saw about 15, 20 years ago. It had a two-headed farmer and a single-headed farmer, and it said 2 out of 3 farmers support GMOs. This world's in a mess. And we need solutions. We need responses. We need to do something. But if you really look out there, and a very wise man noted that there are special realms of hell for those who remain neutral in times of moral crisis. We're in times of moral crisis everywhere. The environment is getting abused and neglected. The devas are leaving. People are being abused for every poor reason. Whether it's race or religious differences or socioeconomic differences or God knows what else. People are it's not just dislike, they're slaughtering each other on this planet. We are in a world of hurt, and we need to do something. And every one of us, we wouldn't be in this room if we didn't feel that call deep inside to want to do something. But think about, what can you possibly do? What can you possibly do? If these teachings are not practical, in a way that you can apply them when you get up in the morning and still be applying them when you go to bed at night, they're useless. And we are wasting our time, and we should go find something better to do. But that's not the promise, that's not the commitment, that's not the gift and blessings and offering of a true spiritual teaching. And it certainly isn't what Yogananda said. Yogananda referenced the Mahabharata, as the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu scripture, is a very, very short chapter out of this enormous epic. The epic is it was a poem originally. It was 100,000 verses. And the Mahabharata is just this really tiny slice out of it. And it's an allegory for how we wake up, for what happens. Think about 100,000 verses worth of swirling energy for us to wake up. There's a lot going on. And it's a remarkable read. And Yogananda would quote it. He would pull out, this is what this looks like. Because all of the characters in there are what's inside of you. They're what's going on inside your heart and your mind and your nature. They're the citizens of your own inner kingdom. And there's one great character. She is Draupadi. She represents the Kundalini power. She's married to the 5 greatest heroes in all of India, the Pandava brothers. And they represent our good qualities. They represent our 5 chakras. They represent that part of our inner nature that is at the very center and gives us the power to wake up. And without going too far into the story, we could spend about the next 8 hours just telling the story and talking about it. What's happened is the 5 brothers have gotten themselves into a dice game with desire, and they've lost. Okay? If you gamble with desire, if you gamble with the world will win. So, it's one of the little teachings that are in there. But what's happened is they've lost not only the dice game, they've lost their kingdom, they've lost their clothing, they've gambled away themselves, and they gambled away their wife. And so the king, who represents material desire, he's gloating, he's just thrilled, and he calls to have Draupadi, their wife, dragged out of the women's chamber, and brought to the gambling hall right in front of everybody. And he humiliates her, he drags her there, this high-born woman, he has her dragged out, and she is saying, is there no righteous man left in this room? And she's appealing to the elders, she's appealing to everybody, and nobody will lift a finger to help her. And Duryodhana is gloating so much, he says, you can pick from any one of these other heroes. You don't even belong to these 5 warriors anymore. I've conquered them through gambling. And he says, they don't even own themselves. They don't own them. They don't even own their clothes. And then he gets this bright moment where he goes, you know what? They gambled you away. You don't even own your clothes. And he turns to his brother, Dusasana, and he says, take her clothes off of her. And she's wearing a sari, and a sari is 6 yards of fabric. And she looks around and she's mortified. I mean, this is evil and unfathomable beyond measure. And she looks around, and none of her husbands will look at her. And none of the elders will look at her. And Dusasana walks over and he starts to take off her sari. And she realizes in this moment that all human aid is lost to her. And she falls on her knees. And she prays to Krishna. Krishna is Jesus of the East. And she prays to Krishna, who's alive at this point, by the way, in the story, and they've got a great connection. They're great friends. So she prays to Krishna because she knows he's the pipeline, he's the guru, he's the access to the divine. And she just loses consciousness to everything else. And Dusasana unwinds the sari. And he unwinds the sari. And he unwinds the sari. And he pulls, and there's 1 yard, and 2 yards, and 3 yards, and 5 yards, and 6 yards, and 10 yards, and 20 yards, and 40 yards. And still she's kneeling there, and she's fully clad. And the whole room is aghast at this thing that's happening, because clearly she wasn't wearing 40 yards when she came in. And, they start to realize the great adharma, the great unrighteousness that's going on. And they stop at one point and they catch themselves. But the message the masters would give us is that we have to play the game. We have to live our lives. We have to make our choices. We have to listen the best we can and put out everything we have. But it will never be enough unless we're connected to the source. And the source, it's like a tree. I mean, he was just using a agricultural metaphor because it was an agricultural world at that point. But he was just saying, if you take a stem off of the tree, it's dead. If you don't connect it to the soil and the sun through the trunk, through the roots and the trunk and the leaves and the layer that allows things to move and out through the branches, nothing's going to happen. All there is just this thin little stick, and that's his message to us. We have to draw from the source. We have to draw from God's presence, and that it's there all the time. And then more than that, it even comes in a human form to help us have a connection directly. There's a story of a young monk. Ananda isn't a religion. Self-realization isn't a religion. It's awakening and dawning awareness of our own connection with Spirit. Look around this room. Look at how many different people there are. Look at how many different characters there are and different personalities and backgrounds. If this was a religion, we'd all look the same somehow. There's just no way. God is omnipresent. Anyway, this monk, he was an orphan, and he ended up growing up, I think it was in Tibet, but anyway, it was an orphanage, a Buddhist orphanage. And he is lived in a male monastery his entire life. And he's now like 12 or 14, and it's time that he gets to go into the village to help bring supplies back, and it's his first visit. And he goes down there with the elder monk, and they're gathering up the things, and he's just staring. He's never seen anything like this in his entire life, but he keeps noticing women. And he sees a woman, he looks at his brother monk, and he says, "Oh my God, we should pray for that poor person." And the monk says, "Well, why would we do that? And what's the matter?" And he says, "Well, look at her. She's so deformed. She has these big growths on her front." And the monk laughed. And he said, "My brother," he says, "those are breasts. That's a woman." And he says, "Huh?" He says, "Yeah, those." He says, "Well, tell me about it." And he says, "Those are given by God to half of the people in the world." He says, "Well, why?" He says, "Because in case they ever have a child, they'll be able to feed that child. In case they ever have a child." And the little monk stopped and he said, I have never any need for fear or doubt again. Because if God so prepares for a soul that might not even be born, how much more does he care for us? Yogananda tells a story. His life is full and rich of all the things that we find in life. The masters are not insulated from the things that we have to face and deal with. And the difference in their lives isn't the kind of life they have. I mean, we'd all like that, wouldn't we? We'll find God and life will be just bonbons and feet up and chocolates and a great time. If you look up here, you start to ask the question, Christ ended up on a cross, Krishna was chased around the country and persecuted endlessly, Yogananda was betrayed. I mean, the spiritual life isn't insulated from all the things that everybody has to deal with. But what's different is how they choose to respond, what they choose to do. There's a great story, and this is where we'll end as part of the service. But Yogananda, he is given, even as a young man, he loves God. He knows that everything he's looking for will be found in God. And then, of course, he lived a life, just for those who don't know, he lived a life of tremendous and dynamic engagement with society. And he was not able to go and hide out in a monastery and just wander the Ganges for his lifetime. He was one of the most public figures of that century, and is the reason that yoga, one of the primary reasons yoga had an international day the other day, or is even in the West. But here he is, he's a young man, and he's got a family, just like all the rest of us. His older brother's constantly torturing him, teasing him, taunting him, making fun of him, belittling him. And his brother was very materialistic, and he's visiting his brother kind of in passing. He's going to visit the town of Agra where the Taj Mahal is. And his brother says to him, because Yogananda said, I'm not interested in Dad's wealth, I'm interested in God's wealth. And he says to him, it would serve you right, Mukunda, Yogananda, if Father disinherited you. How foolishly you're throwing away your life. He and a friend were fresh from a train, figure of speech merely, were covered with dust, he says. Having just arrived home to his brother's home from Calcutta. And there's a challenge. His older brother says, I'll tell you what. He says, you think God will take care of you. You believe that God will take care of it. So far, God has taken care of you through Father's wealth. So now I have a challenge for you. If you really believe God will take care of you, tomorrow he actually challenged him the next morning, but he said, you and your friend must get on the train. I will buy you one-way tickets. You must go to the town of Vrindavan, the town of Krishna, and you must get there. You must see all the sights of Vrindavan. You must take no money. You must not miss any meals. You must tell no one of your circumstances, and you must find your way back before midnight tonight. Do you accept the challenge? And Yogananda unhesitatingly says, absolutely. And he and Jitendra get on the train, and Jitendra is going, are you nuts? Let's take at least a little money in case. Let's do something. So you've got the two. You've got the force that's trying to reliance versus reliance on God. And Yogananda absolutely refuses to have anything to do with any security other than being in this experiment. And they get on the train and they're going. And Jitendra is just absolutely panic-stricken. He just sees them completely lost and starving all day long, not fulfilling it, not knowing how to get back, and just there they are. And India's not particularly a place you want to get lost in, even if you live there. So anyway, this is going on. And they're on the train. They get off the train, and they're even accosted on the train, but Yogananda tries to brush these guys off. They're immediately accosted as they get off the train. Somebody locks arms with them, a couple of guys, calls a horse carriage, and they're taken to an ashram that was expecting a couple of princes. They couldn't show up. And they have one of the finest meals that Yogananda's, they're a 20-course meal of the finest foods ever. And they get out, and they're both looking at each other going, oh my God. And Jitendra, as soon as they get out of there, Jitendra says, well, now what about lunch? We got breakfast okay, but now what about lunch? And so it goes throughout the day. The response, and it's so beautiful because it's not a fictional response. The response is far, far, far in excess of the minimum. The choice to move to Ananda, the choice to choose God first, and then to respond, has been one of the most remarkable adventures in a lifetime filled with endless opportunity and privilege. Not privilege, I mean, I earn now less than I did in high school. It's not privilege in an outer way, but I live a life that's richer than I could possibly have imagined as a billionaire. I can go anywhere in the world and there are friends there. And I've gone many places in the world that I could never have gone otherwise. I live surrounded by beauty, by kindness, by goodness. I live a life that's endlessly intriguing and filled with possibility. And an endless question mark of how is this going to work out? And an endless series of responses that so far exceed the minimum response of a kind God or a kind spirit that would just kind of help you kind of get by. And it's terrifying because, we have to learn. We have to learn to discern the difference between our own sense of what's possible and what God would wake us up to, what we would wake up to inside ourselves through our own divine connection. And it takes tremendous courage. But the world is desperate. The world is desperate for you and you and you and you to step into that connection, step into that relationship, and allow that light to flow through into all the uncertainty, all of the need that's out there. There's not a darn thing you can do. The world isn't interested in you fixing it. But God is trying to wake the world up to a higher and more powerful way of expressing light. And you can be a channel for that, and it's all the difference. Let's take a moment of silence.